Morning Express. Now let's set the ball rolling on the program. Earlier, I told you that it promises to be a very fiery discussion on the program this morning due to the nature of topics captured on front pages. Now, one of the papers that we read out today is the Daily Courier, and we happen to have a publisher from the Daily Courier in the studio with us this morning, Mr. Seun Ibukun-Oni, who is a regular and has been in the studio just about one time, I think, and many times virtually. Well, good morning to you. It's wonderful to have you here.
It's actually okay. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Let's talk about the first issue in the news. Today, we are starting off with rather not an economic problem or a security problem, but rather a political debacle, where the presidency said boldly that there is no vacancy in Aso Rock in 2027 until 2031. And now, the People's Democratic Party, as well as the Arewa Consultative Forum, is hammering hard on the presidency, citing why such blatant statements coming in from them.
For me, I think I would say the Secretary to the Government of the Federation who made that statement was actually did not actually read the mood of the nation at the moment. It was a careless statement, and that's just putting it mildly. Yeah. This is a period when the nation is going through, to use very moderate language again, dire economic situation. People are not smiling. Unemployment, like the figures from the National Bureau of Statistics are shown, is not the best of time. The last time we were here, we discussed about foreign direct investment. Yes. The chips are out. The figures are very bad. Inflation, highest. Just mention all the economic indices. They are not favorable. And someone that high in government is busy talking about 2027 to 2031 politics. I think it's quite unfortunate, and that also tells you about the temperament and the psyche of the type of people we have in our leadership. Yes. They seems to be disconnected from the populace, because like the PDP, the spokesperson to the ex-vice president Atiku rightly puts it, yes, is careless to be talking about that now. And by the way, I think just leave Nigerians to determine the fate of the incumbent when they go to the poll in 2027. Not anybody talking about one region should not fit candidate for now or such kind of thing. I think it's a careless statement, and I just hope those who are handling the communications department, I think 13 of them now, they will find a way to...
The president seems to have a lot of mouth.
A lot of mouth now. You know, we used to say mouthpiece. I think the mouthpieces now.
Yeah, he has a lot of mouthpieces.
A lot of mouthpieces now. So they must find a way to do what we call damage control in communication, to find a way to let everyone know that the presidency has not abandoned the duty of governance, running after 2027 politics.
Now, I mean, such statements coming in from the SGF, is the SGF, as highly placed as he is, in the right position to be making such statements or political statements for the presidency of President Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu? Isn't this the work of the mouthpieces that you had rightly pointed out?
I think that's the reason why I use the term careless. As someone high in that office, a former governor, two-term governor of Benue State. Yes. He was in the Senate at some point, yeah, and later now sitting in the saddle. One of the reasons why people with that type of experience is usually picked to sit in that office is because there is a temperament required to sit in that kind of an office. Yes. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation is more like the warehouse of a lot of the administrative work of the nation. You know, there's a difference between the administrative work of the presidency, which, of course, the Chief of Staff often oversees. But when you talk about, you know, overseeing and running things, the entire country, It
So
actually rests
the temperament of the person
of that
also
person.
matters.
You don't. It's not something you can't be a careless talker. All right, you can't talk carelessly. You must weigh the consequences of the statement you are making, because oftentimes your statement is seen as what we call policy statement. All right, so most of the people who reported it this morning simply say that's the thinking of the president, and it's quite unfortunate.
Well, let's also talk about the intentionality of that statement and the fact that it was sort of channeled towards the northern part of the country. Peter Obi is not from the north. He is from the southeast. And he's a member of the Labour Party. Even though talks have been going on here and there of a possible merger, once again, between Alhaji Atiku Abubakar and Mr. Peter Obi ahead of 2027, we don't know whether that is happening. But what if Peter Obi runs under the Labour Party for 2027? Will there still be no vacancy in Aso Rock for anybody to go in?
That still boils down to the culture of what I would call tokenism in this part of the world, where people, the moment they find themselves in the corridors of power, they become praise singers.
Yes.
The job they do is more like the often celebrated praise singers in the traditional Yoruba palace, where the king is coming and is eulogizing the king with a whole lot of very praise singing and head swelling enchantments. Sadly, somebody in that high office must not be seen doing that part as a praise singer. He must know that his major work is to create a buffer around the president. Don't forget that the northern part of the country, like you rightly said, that statement was actually targeted at the northern part of the country. I must also add that he is from the northern part of the country, even though they are often categorized as middle belt, but he's from the northern part of the country. We have the tax issue that had been generated a heated debate across the length and breadth of the country.
Yes.
But primarily, the major opposition to the tax bill had been coming from that part of the country, the northern part of the country. And you are making this type of statement, very careless rhetorics. I think it just tells you that oftentimes people in that corridor of power, especially in this part of the country, usually don't know what's going on in the society. Because if he really knows how tempers are flying, he will not even talk about 2027 for now. I think in any way. They will busy themselves with, the major talk everywhere is just return us back to the so-called bad days. I use bad in quote now, the bad days of Buhari. Just take us back there. At least we are better off. That's a cry.
Interestingly, a lot of persons, insinuated or hinted at the fact that as bad as Buhari's administration was perceived to be at the time, if he should leave office and a new president comes into power, it would only get worse, and people would now start wishing that Buhari had just continued, or at least the sufferings of Nigerians would have been at the Buhari level and not at the Tinubu level now. I'm just speaking based on comments, perceptions that is out there. Now, this is the perception about this government, and here you have the same government blatantly telling Nigerians and the opposition parties, no vacancy for you. What you are seeing today is what you'll be seeing until 2031.
I think you are coming from an angle where I'm usually very nostalgic when I recollect that I used to think I'm an incurable optimist. And a lot of people said that before, especially during the tail end of the Buhari administration, that we are going to appreciate this man when he leaves office. And I said, no, we really don't want to appreciate this type of, because I was one of the people who usually label that 8 years as 8 years of a mockery of leadership. All right, you could see that the CNC was not in charge. A whole lot of people around were just throwing things.
It was the day. It was the period when the word cabal came into play, and we saw it happening.
You can cut cabal, not just see it and hear it. It was very obvious across virtually all strata of governance at the time. And when people started saying we are going to appreciate this man after his 8-year stint, I said no, that would never happen. But unfortunately, I think I have to eat back my words because when you bring what we went through during that period, yes. I think we can actually situate it when we recollect what Solomon told people in the Bible narrative, yes. that my father flogged you with horsewhip, but I'm going to spank you with scorpions. All right, that just tells you how wide apart, poles apart, some of the experiences Nigerians had at the time, and we were complaining. It has actually quadrupled. Is you in every sphere of the economy, talk about the price of fuel, you can't compare the two. Talk about employment, you can't compare the two. Talk about food inflation, which is a major need of Nigerians. Yes. You can't compare. And some of the policies that they are churning out, instead of alleviating the plight of the poorest, is worsening things. Look at the school. No. It was the previous administration that brought the school feeding program. Inherited it from Goodluck Jonathan administration. The bursary scholarship, Nelfond
initiative.
If you go through the universities now, for instance, Ekiti State, where tuition used to be less than 100,000, now is almost impossible for children of the poor to go to school because tuition had skyrocketed from below 100,000. Some departments pay as high as ₦1 million in a state university. And we have several, I'm just giving you, citing an example. It's almost the same across board. So education is not what it used to be.
Health is
down the drain.
Even aviation is affected.
So people who said then that we are going to celebrate Buhari if he leaves office, I think it's no longer just a fulfillment of that prophecy, is a reality today.
Well, Atiku as well as the People's Democratic Party and ACF have jointly made this statement that if the presidency says there is no vacancy till 2031, then it means that the South would have done 17 years, the North only 11 years. In a system where fairness and what do you call it? Is it regionalism or something like that? Is promoted. Do you think this division of the number of years done by the South, whether the Southwest, Southeast, South, whatever it is? Of course, Southeast is excluded now. It's just the South and the Southwest. And then the North. The Northeast has never produced a president. And Atiku would have been the first president from the Northeast. What do you think would happen? Because it appears to have this very contentious dynamics to it.
I think the last election has actually shown that Nigerians have come of age to make decisions when the chips are down.
Yeah.
You should know that statement from eBay is actually more of a political statement. And of course, you expect him to do that. He's paid to do his job.
Yes.
That was the rhetorics that actually threw up ex-Vice President Atiku Abubakar during the last general election. The feelers from the opposition People's Democratic Party was to zone the presidential ticket to the South.
Yes.
And I think that was one of the reasons why the Labour Party candidate, who now became a major factor, a major force during the last presidential election, why he actually left the People's Democratic Party, and the Labour Party gave him a platform. Nigerians have come of age to determine, and for me, I will take the word of the Arewa Consultative Forum that it's better for the incumbent and his team to concentrate on governance. When the time comes, let Nigerians go to the poll and let them actually say that we are okay. Let them use their vote to either say yes or no. I think that's the right thing to do, because if you want to bring us into that debate about 16 years, 17 years versus 11 years, it won't take us nowhere, because we all knew what happened during that period, that it was the sick and eventually the demise, the sickness of the ex-president Yaradua and his demise that actually caused that gulf. The rotational system was going smoothly until he came into office. He was sick and spent just barely a year plus in office and passed on. And a southerner, of course, who was a deputy, had to step in. That was what caused that. And like they say in law, it's actually not a human making. It was something beyond. It was a force majeure. It was not something within. It was not the system that brought it. It was something beyond the human control. And when we're bringing into politics and we want to be having that kind of discussion, I think it's unnerving for me, because that was the argument during the last electoral cycle. A northerner just spent 8 years, and somebody saying, no, we have not spent up to, I think, the argument or the arrangement, the gentleman arrangement, because it's not a constitutional issue, by the way. It's just a gentleman arrangement that we rotate power from south to north.
And then either the south or north will now decide whether it's the south,
east. That's why for me, I'm one of the people who would actually want us to now make it a constitutional issue, not just north-south, possibly make it a geopolitical zone issue. At least that way we can moderate some of these unnecessary comments.
Because even in the north, the northeast is quite aggrieved over the fact that it has never produced a president. Rather, the northwest has produced the highest number of presidency in the country. Now, enough talks on politics, Mr. Seun. Let's move on to something else, the tax reform bills, which your paper has captured this morning, talking about statements from the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, citing some sort of inadequacies in Tinubu's tax reform bills over constitutional breach. Now, it's a good thing that you are here. They are rejecting Tinubu's tax bills over constitutional breach. Do you care to let us in on what these constitutional breaches could be, and why is the RMAFC rejecting it?
All right, thank you so much. It's actually a subject of interest to me because it has generated a whole lot of back and forth. Yes. And of course, just yesterday, the Senate again was greeted with the position of senators from the South East, who actually also, in a unanimous decision,
for
further consultations from other parts of the country before anything is done. Last week again, I think House of Reps was in uproar when their spokesperson, who was from Ekiti, stood up and said Ekiti State Caucus had actually adopted was ongoing there. So when RMAFC, when they came up with this, I quickly went in. And a few of the arguments really is what any right-thinking person also should think about. The first thing they actually spoke about is that constitutionally, it is that commission that was empowered to determine who gets what when it comes to revenue. All right, the allocation of revenue is actually a constitutional thing for them. But the provision in the tax bill now wants it to be more of a fiat by legislative pronouncement. And of course, in law, it is just right that when you have any conflict between any other pronouncement by the legislature that conflicts with the provision of the Constitution will always override it. And I think that's correct. Another issue they also highlighted is the fact that the arrangement that seems to, and I think is really not a new conversation in the polity, the sharing of that revenue, in their opinion, some states might actually be shortchanged, and so the fact that is proper, they have a conversation rather than making it a legal issue. Yes. I think that area, I really disagree with that. It's better you make it a legal issue, because somebody might come tomorrow and say a different thing entirely. But if it is a product of law, nobody has that liberty.
When a judgment has been passed, it becomes law.
It becomes law. Or if the Constitution clearly states that this should be the issue. But for me, a bigger issue should be, why not make some of the variables in the tax bill, why not make it a constitutional issue?
In what way? Well, and what are these variables?
Now, some of the variables, the shares of each of the federating units,
yes.
Why not make it, because we had this argument even as undergraduates in the university, that is Nigeria actually running a rigid constitution or a flexible constitution? Is an argument that we always have back and forth about. And I think the popular bent is that is rigid in a sense, but the way we do it is flexible, because you see, every house comes and they actually amend sections of the Constitution. All right? I think it was the 7th or 8th Assembly that actually altered some provisions of the Constitution.
Yeah.
Now we are going to have another review. Constitution review is ongoing now. So you can't call that a rigid constitution. So that's
where the argument is.
That's where the argument is tilting towards. And so we must find a way to ensure that issue as this. The last time, by the way, that a tax bill in Nigeria was actually worked on was around 92, 93. During the military regime.
Years ago.
And you know, a lot of those decisions by the military regime actually did not factor in, did not capture in some of the realities of our day.
And
for instance, there was no internet.
Not necessarily take in civilian
opinions then. We don't have internet then. Some of the banking processes then were done manually. You know, those days where you have to go to the bank and you fill out your teller and all of that. So a lot of innovations and advancement are actually caught up with us, and we must factor in this new reality. Sadly, our focus on just making money from oil had made us a bit docile about our tax system. But the reality today is that our oil revenue can actually not cater for the growing population. Our population is growing faster than our growth rate, and that's a major issue. And the only way you can actually nip that in the bud is that the World Trade Organization SAR usually say those days, Madam Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, he will tell us, instead of fighting over who gets a bigger chunk of the cake, why not just bake a larger cake? And that's exactly the idea behind the tax bill. All right, you make your cake bigger, and
to everybody's satisfaction.
So everybody will now have a bigger size. Instead of fighting over my size is too small over the small cake, why not make a bigger cake? So by baking a bigger cake, even if you are still taking 2%, it will be 2% of a bigger revenue, not you are fighting for 3% of a small revenue. And it makes...
That actually makes sense. And it's very difficult to find somebody explain the tax bill in a very simple and understandable term. And I think that must have been the major bone of contention across board in the country, necessitating all of this further consultations from the northern northern elites and northern lawmakers, and also southeastern lawmakers now seeking for further consultations. If the tax bills were to be explained in very simple and clear terms, hey, look, we are not trying to take more of your revenue from you. We are only trying to make this revenue generation bigger, so that even if you are getting 1% of it, that 1% is going to be bigger than the 5% you are already taking now. Is that the case?
That is the case, but you must also know that we are in a nation where most policies are foreseen from two prisms. All right? And those prisms are the worst prisms you can use to view any policy issue. Yeah. And those are the prisms of religion and ethnicity. Yeah. Okay? If you want to cite a project, nobody thinks about the return on the investment. Don't forget, it's going to be the country's resources you are going to plow into that project. Nobody thinks about how is this beneficial to the largest population. No. Everybody is thinking about Christianity, Islam, thinking about Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, and other from the north. That is usually the prism that people use in viewing things. Yeah. And that, remember, we spent billions of naira in this country a few years ago to conduct census, and the results were never announced. Because he died on the altar of religion and ethnicity. And since then, we've not been able to conduct another census. We spent money. People went around, and before you knew it, Lagos came up, Kano came up, and our figure is more than this, and it was never announced. So we don't even know the true figures. And I can tell you authoritatively that even the census that we have shifted the date quite a number of times, a major reason why we have not been able to agree on it is still this twin evil that has been there, ethnicity and religion. All right? Before you know it, people start raising such things as we don't want to identify anybody's religion. Another set will say, no, identify everybody's religion. The next set of people will say, if you are coming to our place to count us, you must factor in our religion. You want to take biometrics of people, and you are insisting that you must not tell people to remove their veil.
That's the controversy there.
Those are very, sometimes they can be very comical, the things we major on, and that is the same evil that has bedeviled this tax bill now. Nobody is talking about what share are we going to take.
The conversation has always been centered around our people, our
religion. In fact, sadly, I think it was last year, I saw a contribution by a professor of economics from one of the universities in the country.
Yes.
And do you know the angle he came from? That the bill should not pass because it contradicts Sharia law. I said, my God.
Nigeria is not governed by Sharia law, Mr. Seun.
No, he started citing that, part of the country is actually still under some of those Sharia laws. And not really Sharia law in the but there are some religious interpretation of some of the laws. That's why you have the Sharia courts across the northern part of the country. And that was his argument. I did not see any sane economic argument.
And this is a professor of economics.
Professor of economics.
Interesting.
And so you can see eventually governors and elite from that part of the country, if they want to get advice and counsel on the tax bill, I want to believe that's the type of person that we actually reach out to. Please, you're a professor of economics, he will definitely mislead them. So you can now see why somebody like the chairman of the tax bill, he went to the floor, and I watched the video. I sat down. How is he going to convince these people who have actually made up their mind not to listen to anything that is being said about the tax bill? And he broke it down. In fact, if you were an SS1 economics student, there is no way you would misunderstand the details of the tax bill. He was so, It was so meticulous. He broke it down to the simplest beat you can imagine. But guess what? As soon as it was done, somebody raised his hand and said, yes, we have heard you, but we are saying that he's against the North. I'm like, so from this 1 hour plus explanation, that is the only thing you deduce. It's sad.
Well, it's I'm completely baffled by these statements, and it's much like Mr. Seun has said. It's the issue of interpretation and misunderstanding, and that has bedeviled the tax reform bills not to see the light of day till today. But consultations are going on in the North, in the South. Different persons, stakeholders holding meetings to consult, deliberate, and proffer a solution for the country to forge ahead with regards to the tax reform bill. Another pertinent issue in the news is a statement by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Kudirat Kekereekun, who said that the wrong and negative perception towards the judiciary is actually hampering the flow of the judiciary's work in the country. Now, this story was captured on 2 front pages this morning, the Blueprint and the Nation newspaper. So let's just take the Blueprint, and then we'll come back to this conversation and get Mr. Seun's take on this statement. On the Blueprint, growing negative perception not good for judiciary, says the CJN. Growing negative perception not good for the judiciary, says the CJN. Self-reflections, strategic planning key, Dongman Mensen says. And AGF says our judiciary has proud history of dispensing justice without fear or favor. And FCTA will continue to support the judiciary, Nyesom Wike said. Now, all of these statements were made during the annual 2024 Justice Annual Conference themed Judicial Introspection and organized by the President of the Court of Appeal, Justice Monica Dongban Mensen. Let me get your reaction to this, Mr. Seun. The judiciary has been quite in the bad books of Nigerians lately, especially coming at a time when the much controversial Are Babalola / Farotimi case is going on. And here we have the CJN saying that the wrong perception of, Nigerians towards the judiciary is also affecting them. How can the judiciary redeem its name? And it appears to always have one problem or the other that continues to mar the trust that Nigerians used to have in it.
Thank you. I think the question you ask is actually the question on the lips of all Nigerians. Sadly, the answer is actually with the people who had made this submission, our Lordship, the CGN, Justice Kekereekun. When she was sworn in, I think one of the promises she made was that she was going to put her foot down and ensure that the judiciary is actually rid of corrupt tendencies, or that is going to be minimized, and eventually the perception of the judiciary will be better improved on. But unfortunately, like all her predecessors, that has been a major issue, talk and very little action. If the perception of the judiciary is going to be improved, like I said earlier, it's going to depend largely on actions and not just rhetorics. We saw the immediate Chief Justice who left before Kekereekun. While he was there, virtually all his outings, he was always saying the perception of judiciary is bad. Eventually, when it was done, he did nothing about it. The person before him, the same thing, nothing was done. And the person before Ariwola, it was the same thing. So I really don't know, because the Afe Babalola and the Farotimi issue, again, has shown us that the rot in the judiciary is actually beyond what anybody has spoken about. But my fear in this issue is that there are two sides to the judiciary.
Yes.
You have the bar and you have the bench. The rot in the judiciary is so huge that both sides are deeply immersed in this corruption.
And when you say both sides, can you simplify that?
The bench, you are talking about the judges and the rest of them.
Yes.
Why the bar, you are talking about the lawyers.
The lawyers.
Right. The Parotimi, Afe Babalola controversy, the allegations, the counter allegations, and of course we saw a report that also alluded to the fact that a few years ago the nonagenarian Afe Babalola actually was part of some of the bribes that took place during the Obasanjo era. And that is coming out. Nobody's saying a whole lot about it, of course, because it was a foreign paper that actually published
WikiLeaks.
it. Okay, if it were to be maybe a Nigerian tabloid, or attacks would have been coming from
sanctions would have
been coming from all the sides.
Different bodies.
And you saw how swift the NBA reacted to the issue of Farotimi and whether it should be a criminal defamation or a civil matter before Ekiti State Magistrate Court. So you see, it's just about whose interest. We saw how the immediate President Buhari tried to go in a fist off with the judiciary.
Yes.
They broke into houses of judges because they got what they call credible evidence at the time that they had hard currencies in their apartment.
Yes.
They got some of those currencies, but nothing was done. Cases that go to the institution saddled with, seeing out cases around the judiciary.
Yes.
What we usually hear can be funny sometimes. You hear about a judge who actually undermined the justice system in a state. I will cite an example. The immediate past state Chief Justice of Imo State Judiciary. She was immersed in age forgery. All right. But eventually, when they sat on her case, and the outcome was that she should be immediately retired, and that the emolument she has collected within those periods, why her age actually elapsed, should be returned, and that was all. It's also the same with lawyers. You hear such thing as they are fining him for 2 years, he will not practice for,
But after that, he comes back into the system.
He comes back into the system, and that's not serious enough. So if they want to clean the debt in the judiciary, they really know what to do, because both sides are actually involved. The bar is involved, the bench is involved. So if they want to clean it, the Legal Practitioners Council must start dealing with those on the bar. Why the body that is actually NJC, I think they are the ones saddled the responsibility of sitting on issues that had to do with people in the bench.
Judiciary.
They also should sit tight and ensure that we don't see this slap on the fist punishment for those who are caught red-handed. There should be more. We should see more proactive thing. We can see what's happening in the U.S. Former lawyer of Trump. We saw how they were serious about it. Eventually, when they sat on it, he was indicted and he's going to jail. We've seen people before him, they went to jail. I mean, high network individuals, senior lawyers in that climb. And what they do there is that the moment you get that, they take is for life. They seize you can't go and practice again.
Your certificate.
You can't practice again. Those are the kind of punishments we want to see here, so that younger ones can now see examples of people
and chart a better course for their career.
Better course. When we start seeing that kind of punishment, then we'll get it better. But today, when a lawyer is indicted and there are 6 or 7 other lawyers appearing in court to defend that kind of a person, we are not serious here. So if we are serious, the perception of the judiciary would be better off, and the Nigerian judicial system will also be better for it. All
right, Mr. Seun Ibukun-Oni, it's been a wonderful conversation here. Always a pleasure to have you in the studio. And I believe the viewer out there will agree that you delivered justice to all of these issues in the news.
Thank you, Mr. Chigioke, for having me again.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you.